Going on, everybody? Welcome to another Angle of Pursuit podcast, your fantasy football home over at fakepigskin.com. I'm your host, Kyle Robert. You can follow me on Twitter at NotoriousKRO. With me tonight, it's my guy Damian Dabrowski, rocking the sweet Corey Dillon jersey, the throwback Bengals. I love it. What's up, Damian?
Going vintage on you here.
Mm.
You gotta love whenever you get like the '90s eBay gold you find on there. So yeah, but hey, it's awesome to be here on a Monday, actually having a full slate of games to talk about. But if we're being completely honest, that was a pretty ugly week one.
It was
I mean, I
awful.
was I was on the couch at one point at like 6 o'clock, and I was like, this has been a gross day of football.
Yeah, no, okay, so I was at a bachelor party in Vegas, and I was watching with my buddies, and we were just, I was making bets, and I was sitting in the sports book, and I'm like, I should have just gone under on every single game. The scores were
Yeah,
low.
yeah.
All the big time fantasy producers are either out there getting hurt. We'll talk David Johnson. We'll talk Allen Robinson. We'll talk all kinds of stuff tonight. We'll help get you set for your waiver wire. My article will be up on Fake Pigskin on Tuesday morning. Make sure you check that out. But yeah, it wasn't a pretty night of football. I mean, Thursday was glorious. I'm sure you loved every minute of that. But uh, the
Yeah,
Kareem Hunt,
wonderful way to open the season.
yeah,
But
the
you know what?
Kareem.
Hey, instead of 19-0, I got to settle for 18-1 now.
Mm. It's the little things, and you just kind of have to deal with it. So let's start with that Thursday night. Kareem Hunt, Mike Gillislee, both found the end zone 3 times. Both had a really nice game. Who do you trust more going forward?
Oh, easily Hunt. I don't think that's even a question there. I think it was interesting with him fumbling on the Chiefs' first play from scrimmage. I'm sure a lot of Hunt owners, were worried that we might not see him for a little while after that. But I think the fact that he was right back out there in the next drive, got the next carry. I think it just shows how committed Andy Reid and this offense is to him right now. We obviously saw him involved in the passing game, and not just in screen passes and dump offs, but sending him deep
Hmm.
down the field. And obviously part of that had to do with the weaknesses of the Patriots defense there, but he did show his versatility, which you like to see, and the fact that we didn't really see Sharkhandrick West do much aside from the late touchdown there
Yeah.
is obviously encouraging. I think he's the guy that we can count on getting 15 to 20 touches weekly, which I mean I think that was the expectation later towards draft season, but I think it just affirmed that. Whereas with Gillislee, I mean, I don't think his performance was surprising in any sense. I think we assumed he was going to be the goal line back, and he scored 3 goal line touchdowns. I think we expect the Patriots to put up a lot of points. I don't think it's going to be that crazy where every time they get down there they're going to run it. I'm sure there'll be some short touchdown passes to Gronk or some of the other guys, but I do think that that his role in that offense is pretty cemented. But he has nowhere near the yardage upside that Hunt does, especially not having any involvement in the passing game really.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like he's really like, if the game script's going right, if they're in the red zone a lot, he'll have a chance to do what he did on Thursday night and get 3 touchdowns. But there could be other games where he's kind of useless. Are you going out and trying to make moves this week? Are you trying to maybe see if you can parlay him into something else? If you need a receiver help, you go knock on David Johnson owner's door. You go knock on I don't know, some other owner that looks running back needy and say, hey, I got Mike Gillislee. I'm okay at running back. Are you willing to give me X receiver and see if you can't pull something off?
I mean, it certainly doesn't hurt to try. I think that depends on kind of how competitive your league is. I think if you're playing, with people that have been playing for a while that know what they're doing, it's almost going to be insulting if you come at them after this 3 touchdown game and try to act like Gillisley is a top 5 running back all of a sudden. But if you're playing in a more casual league and somebody might just see those stats on paper and think that this is LeGarrette Blount, but basically a younger, faster version of him, which I mean in a way it is, but I think you have to consider that a lot of the reason for Blunt's workload early in the season was the Brady suspension. I don't think we're going to have a lot of, especially with how the Patriots defense looked. Week one, I don't think we're going to have a lot of games, where they're just running clock the entire second half, and
Yeah.
he's getting 25 carries. I think we're going to see a lot more of the other guys worked in, and I still think he can easily get you, double digit touchdowns, but I don't think there's going to be a lot of 140-yard weeks with him.
Yeah. So in standard leagues where you get those touchdowns are really important. He's obviously a nice play, but there's so many mouths to feed in that offense, and at this point it's just kind of he's a nice piece. I obviously would be a guy in start consideration most weeks, but I'm not running out to the wire. So, Damian, you watched all the games on Sunday. What was your biggest takeaway? Who impressed you the most?
I think if we're looking at it, from a fantasy impact, I think seeing Ty Montgomery basically, handle 95% of the running back snaps and get, over 20 touches, I think that's a terrific sign for him. I think kind of all of his detractors in draft season were really worried about the workload. Because if that's not a concern, then and you look at a situation, you look at the fact that he's playing with Aaron Rodgers, that this team has so many weapons that they really can't, the defenses aren't going to be able to devote very much attention to the run game. The upside is there. It's just a question of if he can stay healthy, if he can, give you 16 games, and if he's going to get enough work. And if they're willing to give him that type of workload against the Seahawks defense, obviously the efficiency wasn't there, but I think that's going to come, as they play weaker defenses, as they're moving the ball. He's not going to need this many touches to give you, 100 yards or so. But seeing him, down on the goal line, get a rushing touchdown there, I think is a terrific sign for him. And I think, people were looking at him potentially as kind of a low-end RB2 flex. I think if this is a sign of things to come, he's more of a, high-end running back too, which is a pretty big difference given where you were getting him in drafts.
Yeah, I mean, I was all in on Ty Montgomery. This offseason was one of my players I planted my flag in, and guys, I was trying to get as much as I could. And, week one was great. And, this was a big game for me because I was a little worried that, Seattle has a really good defense, that how much is Ty Montgomery really going to be able to use? How much is he going to be on the field? It obviously has that passing down work, so I ended up making him a guy that I played a lot more than I thought I would and initially when I was setting lineups, and I was really happy I did. He had an amazing week. He obviously is going to give you that safe floor with the passing game each week, and even if he's only getting you 5 for 40, 6 for 50 on the ground, he's going to give you that value. And then if he finds the end zone, all of a sudden you have a guy who's top 10 running back upside. So I loved seeing Ty Montgomery. For me, there was a couple names that stood out, and I think the biggest one was Leonard Fournette. Obviously, the game script really dictated a potentially really nice game for Fournette, which, Jacksonville rolling Houston on the road, I guess we'll see how it goes week to week, but I did have serious concerns about Fournette, about how much he would be used. 26 carries, 100 yards, a touchdown. Had a really nice game, but this is also a Jags offense that we're really concerned about. But if their defense can play like this and, at least keep them in the game, that has to keep Fournette owners really excited, and, the potential of him returning that late second, early third round price tag that owners were paying, that's in the realm of outcomes now, and I wasn't sure about that coming into the season.
Yeah, I guess I'm still a little reluctant to buy in on this, just because I don't think this is a situation that we're going to see very many weeks in Jacksonville. Now, I mean, the defense did look great. They obviously had a lot of big offseason signings. Bring in Calais Campbell. They brought in Malik Jackson 2 years ago, and with Jalen Ramsey, looking like a superstar in that secondary. Yeah. They're obviously going to be able to contain teams, which is big. But let's not forget they were playing Tom Savage here. I mean, this Houston wasn't going to be moving the ball on anyone. I mean, they could.
I loved how fast they were able to pull him. Like I don't know. I was watching, I think, Hasselbeck this morning, Tim Hasselbeck on ESPN. And he was like, if you're gonna pull him after like a quarter or a half or whatever, like, you obviously thought Watson was good enough. So why didn't you just play him from the jump instead of messing around with Tommy Savage for a half?
Yeah, well, I mean that's the Bill O'Brien thing, though. I saw on Twitter today they were showing basically how many games he's used multiple quarterbacks in, and it seemed like it was like 70% of the games he's coached. And granted, part of that is because they haven't had a good quarterback since, I don't know, like Matt Schaub's peak maybe. But I guess here's the thing with Fournette. I wasn't that surprised by the workload, in the sense that I wasn't really worried about Chris Ivory or TJ Yeldon getting a substantial amount of touches. I was more worried about the fact that I don't think Jackson was going to be in a position to run the ball 30 times, even with
Yeah.
an improved defense. I think when they play an actual offense, because it's not like Fournette was particularly efficient, and so it's like he's not going to be able to get 26 touches if he's getting 3 yards a pop on the ground, unless the other team just isn't scoring. So kind of this is again, we mentioned it with LeGarrette Blount and kind of Gaines' script when he was on the Patriots last season. I just can't envision too many scenarios where the Jaguars have a double-digit lead for more than half the game, and they're basically just content running the ball. So I mean, it's certainly not a bad sign, but I don't think this really changes the outlook for Fournette that much for me.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. Like I'm not excited about Fournette. I was pessimistic about him coming in. Next 2 weeks, they are at home versus the Titans and the Ravens. I think those are going to be matchups where we'll see how much Fournette can be consistently used. Obviously, he has the Jets after that, so that'll be a nice matchup. They can run up and down the field on them. But, yeah, I want to see, if he's still getting 20, 25 carries against Titans, against Baltimore, and being successful with it. So, but I thought it was interesting. There a couple more pieces that stood out for me. Zach Ertz. I know we were both excited about his potential this season. Obviously, Jordan Matthews is gone, and Ertz blows up in this first game. 8 catches, 93 yards. Really nice day. And Randall Cobb, 9 catches, 85 yards. Rodgers loves him. He's healthy now. And that was great to see. So, it's real. I don't want to. It's hard to not overreact or to one thing, but at the same time, like you kind of have to look at what they did in week 1 and kind of analyze it to somewhat. You don't want to completely blow up your whole offseason plan, but there's definitely stuff that we got picked up out of week 1, and those are some of our impressive performances. Now, Damian, we're gonna start our new Monday segment. I think it's gonna be one everybody's gonna love. It's our dump of the week. Basically, who took the biggest dump on the field? And I gotta go first. I gotta talk about my boy, Mr. Red Rifle himself, Andy Dalton. He was impressively bad. 4 interceptions, a fumble. I mean, if you started any Bengals, like RIP your team. Like I might win one of my leagues, and he got me -11. Like thanks to Stephon Diggs, who we're gonna get to in a little bit.
So
but
bad.
yeah, 4 picks. Yeah, he was just a train wreck, and that was really disappointing to see. Now, in terms of Dalton, I know you're not quite as optimistic as I am. Do you think this is kind of something that we should? I mean, obviously not 5 turnovers in one game, but he might be a little more underwhelming than some of the people like I thought he could be.
I don't want to kind of change my tune on after one game, because I know, I mean, I do have some Dalton shares. I was pretty high on his upside, and really the interceptions, the turnovers haven't been a big problem really the last 2 years. They were earlier in his career, and he really kind of cleaned that up. And when you consider that he just, for the better part of last season, the year before, he just, between AJ Green and Tyler Eifert and everybody just being hurt around him, he really didn't have much time with the full complement of weapons. So I still think they can get this together. The one concern is that offensive line just looked so bad. Mm-hmm. And granted, the Ravens have a very strong defense, but I mean, there was like a freeze frame on Twitter. I saw that it showed Andy Dalton, and he had like 3 defensive linemen coming at him, and his right tackle was just turned around facing the wrong way, about like halfway in between where the offensive line is and the sideline. Like there was nobody within like 8 yards of him. Like it literally looked like if you took a freeze frame of like when you have 12 men in the huddle and the 12th guy starts running off and he's like halfway off the field, like that's what it looked like. But it was actually the right tackle on the play. It was insane. So I mean I don't think it's going to be that bad. I hope it's not going to be that bad.
Yeah.
But if he doesn't have time, to let AJ Green get more than like 8 yards downfield, and they have to keep an Eifert to block, or keep Baxton to block, I think that's going to be a real problem. So that's really the one thing that's concerning to me. I think hopefully they can figure out a way to kind of fix that. They do have, some high draft picks, some talented guys in that line. It's just not a lot of veterans, not a lot of guys that have a track record of playing well in this league so far. So that's kind of my one concern with Dalton, but I wouldn't be dumping him just yet.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that I'm not the only one that's a little crazy. Obviously I'm keeping Dalton. I'll probably be starting him next week. There was really bad offensive line play just kind of across the board. The Packers had issues. The Seattle offensive line was a mess. There was, I mean, just really bad O-line play. The Raiders right tackle, they have two guys that were playing, and they kind of rotate them through, and they were both just turning into turnstiles. Yeah, it was an ugly weekend for O-line. All right, Damien, who's your Dumbo of the week?
I'm gonna, we don't want to. We want to go with guys that were actually expected to perform well. Here we're not gonna. I could throw Tom Savage in here, but obviously that's pointless. we knew he was a turd going in. So I'm gonna go with Carson Palmer.
Yeah.
Basically keeping the lineage of, I guess, former Cincinnati quarterbacks now with him, but. It just, I mean, in this matchup, it was so much talk about how, wait on quarterback, take Andrew Luck and just back him up with Palmer. He's got the best early season schedule, those first couple of weeks. And that's great. But, even not even getting into the David Johnson injury, which we'll get to later, when Johnson was still in there, I don't know what Palmer was doing. It just seemed like it seemed like what we saw when you see a quarterback, especially his age, and physically he's lost a little bit. I mean, he can still throw the ball, but I don't know if it's a timing thing. It is week one, so I guess I'd be more concerned if this was happening in week three than in week one, just because aside from the third week of the preseason, these guys really haven't played live really in a setting like this. I mean, they've been practicing. It shouldn't have looked this bad. And he just wasn't able to connect with anybody. And then you factor in now going forward that, Johnson's not going to be there, at least for the short term. That offensive line didn't look great. It doesn't look like a promising situation.
Yeah, Carson Palmer was hard to watch. I was watching that game really closely. And maybe we're just giving Carson too much respect. Like, he had that one season that was the outlier where he was an amazing top 5 option, but maybe that's just all it is an outlier. And what we've seen the past few years in the seasons prior to that, that's kind of what we should expect. And like, he's okay. He'll have his games where he doesn't look atrocious, but at Detroit, like, that should have been a game where he feasted, and he was just a mess. So, yeah, I'm with you there. And let's jump into it. Let's use that as a jumping off point and talk about David Johnson, because, I want to talk about this offense going forward. So David Johnson, he got a wrist injury. He left the game. The reports are flying out left and right. There's teams that are saying this, teams that are saying that. Rappaport's coming out, and Adam Schefter and Arians said they're basically evaluated it like what happened to TJ Logan, and TJ Logan's out 12 weeks. So, IR is a possibility. We may not see him for 8 weeks. We may not see him for 12. There's a chance he can miss the season. So I guess if you were looking at the Cardinals going forward, when we assume that, it's going to be some albatross of Kerwin Williams, and maybe they bring back Chris Johnson. I know they signed DJ Foster from your Patriots practice squad. Like, is this going to be an offense maybe outside of Larry Fitzgerald that we're going to want any part of?
No. I mean, I guess that's, again, we talk about not overreacting, but I feel like going into the season, with David Johnson being basically a consensus number 1 pick. Bell not far behind, but for the most part, Johnson was firmly entrenched, kind of as, if you have the first pick in your draft, you're taking Johnson. He's as safe as it gets. Mm-hmm. And I think basically the excitement around him bumped up the rest of that offense because, like we just brought up with Palmer, I don't think anybody thought his skills at this stage in his career were particularly great, but we figured with Johnson there, with Fitzgerald still there, with John Brown hopefully being healthy, that the pieces around him were just too good for him to essentially fail. But when you take David Johnson out of that equation, Fitzgerald is 34 now, and he's basically relegated to being a slot receiver, or essentially a tight end, if you will, because he's not running anything, more than 15 yards downfield.
Yeah.
John Brown, I like him, but we still don't know if he's going to be able to stay healthy. I don't know if they're going to have time to get the ball downfield. And then who else on that offense are you getting excited about? I mean,
you're not excited about Jermaine Gresham?
No, no. I he's I remember Gresham in college. And I mean, granted, this was probably like 8 years ago now, but he was like such an athletic freak. All he would do is catch like 40-yard passes down the middle of the field. And then basically it feels like for the majority of his NFL career, he's like a blocking tight end who runs like 3-yard out patterns.
Yeah.
It's wild how like guys, their role changes from from what we see in college to basically the type of NFL player they become. But not to get off on a tangent here. I'm honestly I don't think I'm putting in a single bid on anybody in the Arizona backfield right now because I just don't think it's worth wasting my fab money. I don't have any confidence in who I would start. I don't think any of them are going to be particularly good. I don't think the situation was that great. I just think David Johnson was that great, and so it's a case where it's not having somebody fill in for him and still be able to perform. I just think this is going to look real ugly.
Yeah, and that's one of those things. Like, I watched that Giants-Cowboys game. Talk about ugly. Like, the Giants' offensive line was a train wreck, and when you remove a piece like David Johnson, like Odell Beckham, it's amazing how much their offenses kind of collapse on themselves. And when the defense is forced to, pay attention so much to a huge target like that, it really makes the offense go. It makes everything easier on everyone else. But when that piece is out, they can kind of focus everywhere, and it's not a big deal, and the offense completely falls apart. So, yeah, I think everyone's rushing to the waiver wire this week to pick up Kerwin Williams. And, like, if I'm the David Johnson owner, I'm probably putting a low bid on him just to see if I get him. But my guess is somebody's going to go crazy thinking he's the starter and he's in Arizona and he could do what David Johnson did. And, like, there's no way I'm putting more than, 5% of my fab on him.
Yeah, no, I mean, look, you said it there with, if you own David Johnson, then you have to just because you probably don't have a lot of depth behind him. Obviously with him not being a guy unlike Le'Veon, who we were worried really about injuries going in. I'm sure if you took David Johnson, you probably weren't trying to build running back depth early in your draft. You were trying to get some receivers, get some other positions, thinking you were going to have at least one stud for the whole year. So you're probably at a point right now, especially if maybe you also drafted Doug Martin or, a guy that you expected to kind of maybe pop later in the season. You just need somebody who's going to get carries. So in that situation, you have to put a bid on him. But if you still have, if you didn't lose any running backs, I'm certainly not picking up any of these guys with the expectation that they're going to become usable pieces on a weekly basis. I just don't see that. And it's more so if you just need somebody to get you some points because you're short on guys to, plug your roster for week 2. But other than that, I'm not putting any bids on him, and I'm not saying that as a exaggeration. I'm being quite literal. I just don't see the point in wasting fab money on this situation right now.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you. Like, he had 5 carries and got 10 yards. Like, he was awful. He got the touchdown, so that kind of, if you played him in a deep league or something random, like, good luck to you. But yeah, I'm avoiding this situation. I mean, between there and, Cincinnati and, there's just so many backfields that are just a complete mess that I'm just running from. Speaking of messes, let's talk about Zeke for a minute. Obviously was amazing last night. Was involved, I think, 5 for 36 in the passing game, which, that's really nice to see. But, so we're going in. We expected him to play week 1, but then he's suspended. Then on Friday, the news comes out that there's an injunction, and he's going to be able to play the whole season. Now the NFL is fighting it, and they have 2 things going, and if one of them works, then there's a potential he could serve the suspension again. If you're a Zeke owner, are you just going to, let everything play out and attack once it's like, say he gets suspended, you're going to figure it out from there, or are you trying to be maybe a little proactive and I guess, what do you expect to happen, and what are you doing to kind of get ready for that?
Honestly, I'm just working under the assumption that he's playing this season.
Yeah.
And I just think, I'm not trying to dive too deep into this. It's just not worth my time to try to figure out kind of the nuance of how this is going to work. But from what I've seen, nothing with the court happens quickly. I saw Mark Stopa on Twitter, who runs the Stopa Law Firm League that a lot of the Yahoo and RotoWire guys are in. They talk about he's a lawyer, and he basically different type of law, but he essentially said in filing he's filed hundreds of these types of motions, and it's never taken less than 5 months to basically get through the core system. And
Yeah.
I don't see I don't see why that would change. I don't think the court's gonna be like, oh, it's the NFL.
Yeah.
So we want to resolve. Look, they don't care.
Yeah.
To them, it's the same as any other case. So I don't see this changing. And I think with McFadden being inactive week 1, I'm
Yeah.
not even sure who the handcuff to Zeke is at the moment. So again, I'm not. We mentioned it with Kerwin Williams. Again, obviously Dallas is a terrific situation between that O line and the way that team basically funnels their run game, but Zeke is also really, really good. And I think people forget that because it's so easy to say that, the situation is great. Anybody would be great. Darren McFadden is not Zeke. It doesn't matter if it's him, if it's Alfred Morris. I don't think any of those guys are getting more than, 60% of Zeke's production. And if you break that down by the numbers, that's really not that much better than trying to take a shot on basically a high upside backup in any other situation. So I can actually say that having Zeke in a couple of leagues right now, I'm actually totally fine. I did draft McFadden going into the year, in both of them, just because I didn't at that point I didn't know if Zeke was going to have the suspension right away, and if he was, that would change things. But now knowing what we know, I'm actually completely fine dropping McFadden and just using that spot on somebody else that's going to pop on the wire here, this week or in the weeks moving forward.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that because the waiver wire. There's some really interesting names. Like I said, my article will be on Fake Pigskin tomorrow or Tuesday if you're listening to this in the podcast. But yeah, I'm wondering if Zeke's if McFadden's somebody that maybe is one of the first guys you cut. Like sure there's potential, but you could also be Alfred Morris and Sam Bradford, baby. He's just putting up them touchdowns. Sorry, I'm getting a little excited. I was
off the red zone. Red-nosed reindeer.
I was all in on the Vikings this year, and I thought I was losing my mind. And Sammy Biscuits is out here just dropping touchdowns. Diggs has 2 touchdowns.
Sammy sleeves. Sammy's got all the sleeves, but apparently they're no longer hindering his ability to throw passes.
Sammy sleeves and Teddy Two Gloves out there battling hard.
What a duo.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know if it gets much better, to be honest. I mean, except for Alex Smith, Mr. He of the four touchdown performance. He was, your QB1 for the week. So, I mean, everyone saw that coming.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk a few more injuries. Allen Robinson, torn ACL, done for the year. This sucks. Obviously, was a guy that people were kind of fading anyways, just because of the whole Bortles looking a horrendous situation. 4th, 5th round. I know you took him in our podcast league. I guess, are you more interested now in Allen Hurns, Marquise Lee? Maybe he kind of does a thing next year. I like D.D. Westbrook a lot. I have him in a lot of dynasty leagues. Do you think he could be a guy that gets more run in year 1? Like, what's your kind of instant reaction?
Well, Westbrook's on IR, so I don't think we can count on him until maybe at the end of this year. But that's unfortunate because he is a guy that did look really good in the preseason, and maybe might have been able to do something here. But he's out of the equation for now. So it's between Hurns and Lee. I do think Lee's the far more talented player. I mean, he is a dominant guy at USC. And it's just a lot of injuries for him early in his career. We kind of saw him start to put it together last season. But, I mean, this is what when we talked about Fournette earlier, I think obviously this sucks for Allen Robinson. But, I mean, Bortles is actually even worse than he's looked if you think about it, because the only reason Allen Robinson was able to put up those seasons is because he's catching passes that 85% of other NFL receivers aren't going to catch. So now that we substitute in, Hurns or Lee, I think Bortles is going to look even worse. I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball very well through the air. Yeah. And I'm not going to feel good about starting either of these guys. I think on volume alone, you have to do it. But we saw what happened with DeAndre Hopkins this week. I mean, he had 15 targets and 55 yards? And that's what happens when you have a quarterback that can't put the ball where he needs to put it, or even remotely close to where it needs to be, because it's not like you need to make perfect throws for these guys to catch it. You just got to give them a chance. And even that is asking too much. It seems like with some of these guys under center. So I'm certainly not, proactively looking to kind of go after these guys. I would rank it Lee first, Hearns second. But it's really just a volume play, hoping that I don't know, maybe Chad Henne comes in, or I don't know what's going to happen here, but it's not looking good.
Well, and I noticed like they were very comfortable with Bortles not doing much. Like they tried to make him very, very calm, very short passes, not throw a ton, kind of put him in a vintage Alex Smith role, and I think that made him have a better day. He didn't have any horrendous turnovers that kind of killed your team, and I don't know. That might make team in previous seasons when we've seen Lee, when we've seen Hearns be fantasy relevant, they're chucking it all over the field, and the quarterback is making plays, and out there comes the receivers who are getting all these kind of fantasy points, and I don't know. Yeah, and I wanted to bring up something real quick. Hopkins was targeted 11 of Deshaun Watson's 23 attempts. Almost 50% of his attempts were in Hopkins' direction. So, if we assume that Watson starts the rest of the year, it's this little silver lining for Hopkins owners that maybe we could get like a Brian Hoyer 2.0 kind of experience here, and he's just pelting them with targets, and then maybe unsure volume ends up becoming a thing. Let's see what else we have here. Kevin White, just bye. Your NFL career is over. Broken collarbone. This is just massive injury after massive injury. He was already having issues with confidence, and good. It's
no,
not.
Yeah. I mean, you said it. Who knows when we're going to see this guy in the field again? And it's not like there was much upside here, given the offense to begin with. So, I mean, he's a cut everywhere. I'd actually, even in keeper and dynasty, just let him go. I mean, there's a lot of other options out there that haven't basically suffered season-ending injuries 3 years in a row.
Yeah, I want to read you. Evan Silva tweeted this out today. I thought it was it was interesting. Deontay Thompson, Kendall Wright, Josh Bellamy. Those are the Bears' top 3 wide receivers for the rest of the season. Deontay Thompson, Kendall Wright, and Josh Bellamy. And no, 2 of those names are not made up by Madden for injured players.
Yeah, it's the random name generator.
Yeah.
Where you just get
wow. So let's talk about the Seattle backfield. I kind of want to we'll kind of use this because one of the guys I want to talk about, because there is a piece in this backfield that I'm interested in, but from a general kind of overview, this backfield was a mess. Eddie Lacy looked terrible. Obviously, Thomas Rawls was inactive. Procise got a little bit of work. It still looks like they're trying to kind of figure out what they're doing. My guy Chris Carson, I think he's the guy to own. He's very widely available. If you need a running back, I'm picking up Chris Carson over Kerwin Williams. Carson had 6 carries, 39 yards, 30-yard long one. Procise was 4 for 11, 2.8 yards. Eddie Lacy was 5 carries for 3 yards. Their offensive line is a mess, but I think Chris Carson has some juice, and I think he can be a legit guy. Are you on board with that, or are you just trying to avoid this situation as a whole?
I mean, I think that relative to one another, I definitely prefer Carson to Lacy. I mean, Lacy's done. It wouldn't surprise me if they cut him at some point this year. He doesn't look like he has anything left. No. And Carson, even despite that offensive line, Carson did look really good in a limited sample. I do think that Thomas Rawls is still the guy they probably want handling the majority of early down work there. But again, he has such an extensive injury history now that I don't think we can really expect to see him for the majority of the season. Not in terms of just, the ankle issue he's dealing with now. I think he could be back next week, but I'm sure other stuff is going to pop up. And he's the guy that it just seems like he's questionable every week since he entered the NFL. So that's just something you're going to have to deal with. I think what happens is we do get, probably somewhere between, 6 and 12 touches from Carson each week. And maybe Procise becomes more involved on the ground game as opposed to, strictly kind of a third down passing guy.
Yeah,
So
but then maybe he
that's kind of where we see it. Yeah.
maybe he gets injured again after a couple games of getting 20 carries. I don't know. I just feel like if Carson, if you're in the 85% of leagues that Carson's out there floating, I'm adding him, and I think you can get him for relatively cheap this week, and I think there's a good chance that week 2, week 3, he is the most productive Seahawks running back and a guy that helps you the rest of the season. Let's talk about the Bengals backfield. Another mess. Gio Bernard 7 for 40. Jeremy Hill 6 for 26. Joe Mixon 8 carries 9 yards. Obviously, this was a terrible game. Dalton, we already told you he was my dump of the week. Is this just a mess of a game that you can't really take a lot from, or do you expect to kind of see a even mix kind of like this for at least the first few weeks until either Mixon takes the job or Gio Bernard just does what Gio Bernard does?
I mean, this is pretty much what I expected. I just think that, I mean, the thing here is the Ravens did have the ball for, I want to say 40 minutes or something absurd, because they basically were able to run. Flacco only threw like 17 times in this game.
Mm-hmm.
The Bengals just didn't have the ball. So I think that's going to change a little bit, moving forward. But I do think we're going to see all three of these guys. I think, Bernard looked really good, which I don't know, it's encouraging. I mean, it's encouraging, I guess, if you own him. It's probably not encouraging if you're a Joe Mixon owner. But he did look good, and I think he's going to have a role. He's going to get, at least somewhere between 6 and 8 touches a week. I think, a lot of work in the passing game, but also a few carries. So
Mm-hmm.
it's not gonna change overnight. I think that maybe towards the end of the season, we see a lot more from Mixon, but I don't think they're just going to bench Hill altogether. I still think he's going to be the preferred guy at the goal line, maybe on short yardage. So there just isn't a path to Mixon getting more than 8-10 touches a game right now, and there's just not enough to be anything more than a flex play in like a 14-team league. So, I mean, if you drafted him, if you had one of those early drafts and you were taking him in the 3rd, 4th round, it sucks to be you, I guess, right now.
Yeah, and I think that was kind of my thing. Like Fournette and Mixon, I was not about that life. Like Kareem Hunt, Dalvin Cook, who looks good tonight. Like I thought there was a good chance that they get a lot of carries. Not a lot of people around them. Like it would be worth taking them kind of in that range. But yeah, it's definitely a mess. Let's talk about let's do our next segment. It's called Flash in the Pan or Part of the Plan. This is where we're going to kind of give you some guys that are going to be waiver wire ads, and whether we think, this was a 1-week thing, whether you should waste your money, or if this is hey, this guy is going to be a legit factor, go add him now, go make him part of your plan, and get him in there. And let's start with Mr. Tariq Cohen. So, Damian, I'm looking at Tariq Cohen in my PPR league. He had the same amount of fantasy points as Antonio Brown, and was tied for 4th behind only Kareem Hunt, Alex Smith, and Matthew Stafford for most fantasy points in Week 1. Which, I mean, everybody saw coming, right?
I talk about Week 1 surprises. This is, this is as crazy as one. I mean, I can remember it, and like, just not because you also have to consider the fact that we really weren't expecting the Bears to, have a big offensive performance, and for a while they didn't. I mean, Glennon certainly didn't have a big game, but Cohen, what do you have? 8 receptions, something like that. Broke off, a 46-yard run or so, and I think what really helped him was Howard did not look good. I mean, they would have won that game. It was the second to last play of the game. He was wide open in the flat, and Glennon hit him, and it just hit him in the gut, and he dropped it. He catches that ball. That's a game-winning touchdown for the Bears right there. So, I mean, I think at this point you have to assume that Cohen's at least going to be their 3rd down guy. That's going to be, getting 2, 3, maybe even 4 catches a game.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's going to replace Howard as kind of the early downs ball carrier, but he doesn't really need to. I think Howard's ceiling on this one game alone just took a pretty big hit. I don't think he's a running back 1, because you can't be a running back 1 in this landscape if you're going to be capped at like 16 touches a week. So, I mean, it feels weird investing in in Cohen heavily now, just because I still don't think the Bears offense. I mean, you just named their receivers, and those none of those were names we recognize. So I don't know if they're going to be able to move the ball enough for him to basically have the yardage, but it could be one of those Bilal Powell situations where he's averaging like 5 yards a catch, but he's catching five passes a game. So in PPR formats, it's probably going to make sense to go out and grab him if you can.
Yeah, he's a guy that if I'm in a PPR league and I need a running back help and I want a safe floor, like a Theo Riddick, Bilal Powell, or Lance Dunbar when he was doing his thing, Chris Thompson in DC, like he's not a fantasy superstar. Don't think he's going to take over this job. Don't think he'll be the RB1. But he'll get a handful of carries. If he breaks off a 46-yarder, all of a sudden he's looking at 5 for 50, 5 for 60. But I think 8 to 10 targets a game, 6 to 10 targets a game, I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility. I think especially if Mike Glennon's your quarterback, check down city is going to be happening early and often. He had 12 targets on Sunday, 6 more than second place Zach Miller. So like it was Cohen with 12, Miller with 6, and then a bunch of other guys with 3, 4, 5. So obviously Cohen's going to get work. He's not, like you said, he's not going to get a ton of yards on each catch, but 7 for 47 catches and 35, 40 yards and 10 targets. Like I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility in PPR leagues. That's really nice, especially if you need running back help. Like you said with Jordan Howard, like this was a game the Bears were in. The Bears had they were able to keep running the ball, and he got 13 for 52 and a touchdown. So the touchdown saved his day. But yeah, he averaged 4 carries and he had a couple catches, so 3 for 14. Like that helps a little bit in PPR. But yeah, he's gonna be driving fantasy owners a little stir crazy all season, I think.
And what we talked about game script. I think that's really perhaps the biggest thing in Cohen's favor right now, because like you said, if the Falcons were up 17 points in the second quarter here, then I think I wouldn't be as excited about Cohen in the sense that, okay, like this game wasn't close. They were just bringing in basically their hurry up, their catch up offense. But the fact that he was getting all these touches and was essentially a 1-score game for the duration of the game means that he was a big part of the game plan going in. This wasn't something that they adjusted to on the fly because of how the game was going. This was clearly intentional. And again, like you said, I think that's going to help his floor. And I think because Howard is still obviously a pretty talented player himself, and I think the Bears view him more so than Cohen, ideally as kind of their primary ball carrier. We're not going to see, the potential from Cohen that we're hoping from some of these other rookie running backs in terms of workload. But I do think the floor is something they're going to be able to count on. I still wouldn't do it in like a 10-team league or a 12-team league, even if it's only like 2 receivers in a flex. But if we're talking, 12 teams with 3 receivers and possibly a super flex situation or multiple flexes or anything deeper than that, then I certainly think he's a viable flex play moving forward.
Yeah, or if you're like in 12-team leagues, I think if you're hurting at running back and you're in a full-point PPR league, I think he's a guy that, especially if you're waiting for Doug Martin to come back or you want to figure out what's going on in case Zeke misses time. Like I think he's a guy that I'm comfortable picking up. Just understand that he's not going to be 25, 20 points a game. Like he'll have games, and there will be games where the Bears are getting the crap kicked out of him, and he'll have 10 targets. But, he's going to be 8 for 50 and maybe a handful of yards on the ground. That's it. That if he gets in the touchdown, obviously he's had a really nice game, but don't go overreacting. Don't go blow all your fab on Tariq Cohen thinking he can steal this role. The guy I do think might be worth spending quite a bit of your fab on is Kenny G himself, Baby Tron, as the late round QB calls him. Kenny Go Today, however you want to put it. 4 catches, 69 yards, 2 touchdowns, 7 targets. He was second on the team along with Theo Riddick. Obviously, Golden Tate got pelted. Galladay's the thing, and he's part of this offense. He's stepping right into that Anquan Bolden role. You remember how much Matthew Stafford loved his big receiver in Calvin Johnson. Obviously, Galladay is not Calvin Johnson, but there's a lot to like here, and I think he's going to be a red zone presence, and I think he's going to get plenty of work It's going to make him a guy that you can be comfortable starting a lot of weeks in a flex as a wide receiver 2-3 when bye weeks hit, all that kind of stuff. Are you in agreement there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if the volume is going to be there on a week to week basis. I think part of this was they had Patrick Peterson on Marvin Jones for most of the game, which I don't think in most weeks you're going to have a corner of that caliber on Marvin Jones. So the target distribution might be a little bit different. And Arizona was also one of the best teams against tight ends last season. So I think that took away Ebron a little bit, and they weren't really able to run the ball. So I think it was basically a perfect storm in terms of things going in Galladay's favor. But on the flip side of that, the fact that he was able to come through with these 2 touchdowns, I do think that that's building his confidence, and it's building the confidence that the Lions have in him. In terms of, I definitely think he's going to be a guy that is going to get a red zone shot or two each week when they get in that area, because he is essentially kind of fit for that role in that offense. If you look at the personnel they have between, Ebron historically being very bad in the red zone, and Tate being more of an underneath guy, and Marvin Jones being kind of the deep guy. I mean, Galladay, with kind of the speed size combination he has, is a pretty big mismatch there. So I certainly think he's going to get his fair share of opportunities there. I mean, if you think back to a couple of years ago when they had Joseph Fourier, I know he's a tight end, but he's basically a guy that, I think he caught like 18 passes that season, and 10 of them were for touchdowns, or 8 of them, or something like that. Now, I don't think it's going to be that extreme with Galladay in the sense that he's going to get more work than that, because I do think he has the skills to be, a primary receiver at some point in his career, hopefully not too far down the road. But for now, I think he's certainly worth adding, because he does have that upside given the touchdown opportunities he should have. I just don't know if that we're going to be seeing 4 or 5 catches a week. I think it's more so maybe 2 to 3, but with the opportunity to score.
Yeah, he's part of the plan for sure. What kind? If you're spending fab, what are you looking at in terms of percentage?
I'd say, assuming it's a redraft, obviously, keepers dynasties are a whole different discussion. But right now, I'd say somewhere between 15 and 20. I think he's going to be a factor for the duration of the season, and it's just going to be a matter of how many catches he's going to get you. But I don't see, in terms of pure upside, I don't think there's going to be too many guys that are going to come up on the wire this season, with the same potential that he has right now.
Yeah, I mean, look at your team too and understand, like, if you have Devontae Parker and Tyreek Hill and Stephon Diggs, guys with all that upside, maybe Galladay's the guy you want to avoid. But if you have, Larry Fitzgerald, and you have Doug Baldwin, guys you rely on, and then you have like Cole Beasley or something sitting on your wire, like on your team, I wouldn't mind dropping Beasley and picking up Galladay and shooting for that upside. I mean, up to like 30-35%. Like, I'm fine with that. Your league better than I do. So if you think that a really talented receiver who caught 2 touchdowns is going to go for a lot, do whatever you feel is appropriate. But yeah, I mean, 30, like 40%, depending on how your team's built. Like, I don't think that's crazy. The next guy on our list, Mr. Buck Allen. You kind of referenced it a while ago, but Javorius Allen, 21 carries, 71 yards. Obviously, Danny Woodhead got hurt again. Shocker. No one saw that coming. I obviously was in on him. This is a huge blow to kind of what my expectations were, but Damian, you mentioned this is a game where the Ravens controlled the game. Flacco only threw 17 times. Obviously, Terrence West had 19 carries. They ran the ball 42 times as a team. Javorius Allen, is this a guy that's part of the plan, or do you think this was a flash-in-the-pan performance, a game where the Ravens were up by a lot and they were able to run a crap ton?
A little bit of both. It's an interesting name, because I feel like Buck Allen's a guy that, he's been on the Ravens for a few seasons now, and he's had moments. I want to say it was 2 years ago where he got a pretty big second half after a couple of guys, ahead of him got hurt, and then the next year he was basically inactive for half the season, or bouncing up and down from the practice squad, and now they're going back to him. So, I don't think I assume that Woodhead, the way that injury looked, is going to be out for at least a couple of weeks. And Allen was a really big factor in the passing game earlier in his career with the Ravens, like I just said, so they're going to need somebody to replace that. West didn't really seem to get very many targets. I believe he only had one target in the game, even after the Woodhead injury. So it looks like they're not really looking for him to take on that role. And no, they're obviously not going to be able to give two backs 20 carries a week. That's a pretty unique situation here in week one. But I do think that going forward with really not many other options in this backfield right now, that even if it's like a 65-35 split in favor of West, I think Allen's going to make up a lot of that difference with his involvement in the passing game. And we know I don't think the Ravens want to throw it as much as they did last year. I mean, when Joe Flacco led the league in pass attempts, that's never going to be a recipe for success, especially given the fact that he's not a very efficient passer. So that should tell you all you need to know about where they want that offense going. So I'd certainly be a buyer in Allen if you're hurt at the running back position with some of these injuries, and I'd certainly prioritize him over any of the Arizona guys.
Yeah, I mean, obviously Greg Roman came in, so the running game is going to be more important. They're saying Danny Woodhead may be out a while, so if nothing else, maybe Javorius Allen steps right into that Danny Woodhead role. If you're prioritizing waiver wire pickups, are you picking up Tariq Cohen or are you picking up Javorius Allen?
Honestly, I'd probably, if it's standard, I think I might lean Allen, because I think he has a clearer path to more carries. And obviously, this depends on the Woodhead injury, and at this point, we're only, assuming what it's going to be. So I think Cohen's probably the safer play in terms of having relevance for the full season. But in the short term, I think Allen could have a little bit more upside.
Yeah. I think they're both interesting. I might go Buck Allen too. Yeah, I can tell you what, I'm picking up both of them and Chris Carson over anybody in Arizona. Yeah, let's talk about a couple tight ends. First, we'll start with the Pittsburgh Steelers. Jesse James, he of 2 touchdowns on Sunday. Obviously on the road, the Steelers offense wasn't as good as normal. Le'Veon Bell, 32 yards on 10 carries. Obviously Antonio Brown, 11 for 182 was amazing. But Jesse James, 6 for 41, 2 touchdowns. Is this just a flash in the pan, or do you think, this is the tight end and, the Vance McDonald noise and all this stuff, it's just that's what it is, noise. And Jesse James could be a guy that fantasy owners could throw out there and hope he finds the end zone.
This one's easy for me. It's a flash in the pan. I don't really see any type of sustainability really to what we saw from James this week. I mean, you look at it with Le'Veon Bell and Martavis Bryant essentially giving you nothing. Yeah. That's not going to be the case most weeks, and everything they get, it's not. Antonio Brown is still going to get his, so it's just going to be taking away from those auxiliary pieces there, notably James. He's still going to be a factor in the red zone just because, I mean, this guy's like 7 feet tall, so pretty easy to get him the ball there. There was actually one play I think they threw to him, and he jumped up to try to catch it and smashed into the goalpost vertically, not the actual thing. So that should tell you how big he is. But I do think as the season goes on, Vance McDonald's going to become a bigger part of this offense, because I just think he's a much better receiver than James, and he's going to give that offense more versatility and able to kind of stretch the field between the hash marks there. So I think this is the peak of James. This is probably going to be Jesse James's highest scoring game of the season. And I mean, it's a little bit really a low end version of Tyler Eifert in the sense that he doesn't get much action outside of the red zone. So if he doesn't score a touchdown, he's just not going to give you much.
Yeah. Are you dropping Cameron Brate or Jack Doyle or any of those kind of players, Kobe Fleener, if you can pick up Jesse James to take a shot, or you think all those guys will outscore him?
No, I'd keep all of those guys ahead of James. So I can't really see a scenario where I'd be moving to Adam right now.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. I like Zach Miller too, and I know he had 6 targets on Sunday, 4 for 39. Not an amazing day, but fine. What about Austin Hooper? Obviously, you look at his numbers: 128 yards, a touchdown. Amazing, so good. Except for you realize that he only had 2 targets. He did catch both of them. One was for 88 yards. I know we're both in on Hooper this year. We're excited about his potential, but he has the big playability. But if he doesn't get the 88-yard touchdown, he has a very underwhelming day. Do you expect Hooper to kind of be a guy that can still compete for that top 10, or do you think he's kind of on that back end where he'll have a couple big weeks and then have some other really bad weeks?
Well, I think consistency is always going to be a little bit of an issue for him, just because of how many other pieces there are in this offense. He's not going to be a guy that's going to see 5, 7 targets every single week. But we saw the big playability. I still think he's going to be a big target for them in the red zone. So if he didn't have the 88-yard touchdown in this game, obviously it would be a disappointment. But at the same time, I think going forward, he is going to see an increase in volume. Uh, the Bears defense, their secondary is questionable, but their front seven is really strong. And this being kind of obviously a road game for the Falcons, I think that once they get back to playing at home, playing in the dome, playing some of those poor defenses in the NFC South, we're going to see a lot more high-scoring games where there's just going to be a lot more volume in terms of offense on both sides, and that's going to lead to more production for Hooper. So I'm certainly encouraged, and I think there's more to come from him.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Let's finish on a pair of receivers. We'll start with Nelson Aguilar, a guy that I was on a couple of years ago. I was really excited about his potential. Then it looked like he was about to wash out of the league. Then all of a sudden they're moving freaking Jordan Matthews, and they're making room in the slot, and the drum beat starts building about Nelson Aguilar. And week 1, 8 targets, 6 catches, 86 yards, a touchdown. Looked really good. If you're in need of wide receiver help, especially in PPR leagues, is Nelson Aguilar a guy that you're, interested in picking up and seeing if this becomes more than just a 1 week thing?
I mean, we should note that a big chunk of that came on the touchdown, came on a broken play, which
Yeah.
just be aware of that when you look at the stats. At the same time, it's encouraging that when the play did break down, that's who Wentz was looking for down the field. And again, I mean, we had Norman on Jeffrey in this game, so I think most weeks that Wentz won't be as reluctant to kind of throw that way because it won't be as strong of a matchup for the defense. But I think it is encouraging to see him come out and have a strong game here, especially after he kind of got talked up in the preseason, and we saw Matthews obviously get traded. So it's still a clear number 3 in terms of being behind Ertz and Jeffrey in the pecking order in the passing game. But the fact that Torrey Smith didn't really do anything in this game, I think he only had 1 catch or 1 target, and the backs, I mean. There wasn't too much involvement in the passing game out of them. Even obviously Sproles will get his, but it seems like there's certainly a path to Aguilar getting a pretty decent market share of targets in this offense. And if Wentz improves, which so far so good in week 1, if he takes a step forward this season, and I know they have a great offensive line, so that defense is pretty good. So I think this is certainly a situation where he can have some relevance, especially like you said in PPR formats and in deeper leagues where I don't think he's gonna become more than the 3rd option, like I said. But even that could have be somebody that you could play in a flex spot.
100%. The other receiver I want to talk about is Corey Davis. Titans led the Titans in targets, 10 targets, 6 for 69. This guy looks legit. I watched this game very closely. I'm kind of excited. Obviously, Rashard Matthews got a ton of targets, 9. Delaney got 9 targets. Like, Mariota threw it 41 times. It still felt like they were kind of leaning on the run, even though they only ran it 21 times. They obviously had to catch up once the Raiders kind of took a big lead late. Is Corey Davis a guy who's available in over half of Yahoo leagues? Is this a guy that you're kind of adding now and kind of seeing if something can become of him over the next couple weeks?
It was great to see how frequently the Titans were targeting him early in this game, given that he really didn't have much of a preseason. So the assumption was that it would take a few weeks to work him in. But that really wasn't the case at all. He had an unbelievable catch on the sideline there, just jumping over a defender. We know this guy is talented, but I think the fact that the Titans are making concerted effort to get him the ball is a great sign. I mean, I believe Decker only had like 8 or 10 yards on 10 targets. So if that continues, they're certainly going to be allocating more of those
he had
opportunities to Davis.
3 catches, 10 yards on 8 targets.
Yeah, so that's not good. That's not
No.
that's not the Eric
That's
Decker.
not what you're looking for, Bob.
No.
I know you're not watching. I'm sure you're not watching the game, but I do gotta let you know, Kobe Fleener just scored a touchdown. So, your start of the week, is looking real good.
I saw that happen, and I made a concerted effort to not mention it to you, in hopes that you would not notice it and mention it to me. But
all of my start sits didn't go great. But Sam Bradford starting him, sitting Alshon Jeffrey, and playing Kobe Fleener, I'm pretty happy with those 3.
The Fleener Schnitzel, man, he won't die. It's unbelievable.
It was just
Hey, while we're just a quick shout out to our guy Thor 300 here in the comments, just been peppering us with his takes on this whole Ravens situation and everything. But hey, that's what we like to see. When we're live, you guys want to come in here, give us your thoughts on everything we're discussing. I think it makes for for a better conversation on our end. So thanks to him, and hopefully we get more of you guys in the coming weeks. Hey, that's what we like to.
Yeah, and I know it's tough to with Monday Night Football going. So if you want to come and watch us and then go watch the game and then come back for a little bit, obviously we'll be on iTunes. It'll be up on YouTube for you to check out. But we do appreciate you guys coming in, hanging out. We're here to help. That's what we want to do. We want to help you, kind of figure out what to do on the waiver wire. We want to kind of help you figure out what to do, with ad drops, with trades, with, every start sits, getting ready for your week. We're here to help. So, make sure you are hanging out, talking us up, and we'll be here to kind of get you going. Damian, I did have a question for you, though. Obviously, as the season goes along, this will get easier. But we're going to play a little hold 'em or fold 'em. We're going to talk about, is there anybody that after week 1 you're saying, you know what, I know we talked about Darren McFadden, and I think I'm with you there. But is there anybody else that you're like, you know what, I think it's okay to let him go. It's not going to, be something where if you let him go, someone else is going to grab them and maybe they turn into something, but it's a risk you're fine taking. Is there anybody else that you're saying, yeah, okay, I can cut him. It's not going to be the end of the world?
Honestly, I mean, aside from McFadden, I think it's hard to make that type of determination after week 1, especially when you consider just how bad so many teams looked. Mm-hmm. That I almost want to give it another week to basically see some of these offenses bounce back and see kind of what the distribution looks like. In a week where we don't have so many wonky game scripts and situations. I mean, like the Seattle offense, for instance, they look terrible, but like I'm not. I like Tyler Lockett going into the year. I'm not going to cut him right now just because they had a bad week 1.
And he's supposed to get more snaps and more work, and they play the Niners next week. So yeah, I'm with you there. Don't send him to the waiver wire. What about Eddie Lacy? You ready to move on from him?
Yeah, I guess that's a good one. But I mean, I don't have any Lacy shares. Mm-hmm. I wasn't really in on him anywhere. So, but again, depending on where you drafted, there was a time where he was going in the 5th, 6th round. So. Just between how he looked and just the concerns with the offensive line there in Seattle, I just can't imagine a scenario where Lacy is a productive fantasy back this year.
What about any of the pass catchers in Indianapolis? Obviously, you're not letting T.Y. go, and you hope that Luck comes back at some point. But, if you're looking at Jack Doyle as your starting tight end, and you're looking at, maybe Dante Moncrief clogging up some roster spots. I know he had one big catch for 50 yards, but are you comfortable cutting those guys? Maybe even some of the running backs not named Frank Gore?
Yeah, the news on Luck doesn't seem to be getting much better in terms of him coming back within the next couple of weeks. So,
Yeah,
but
Mike.
I guess the tough thing is with Doyle is that if we do have Brissett there or Tolzien, and again, I think generally when you have a quarterback that you don't think can get the ball downfield, the tight end is where they're going to look. So that may, in a weird way, actually benefit Doyle. I mean, not.
Hmm.
I'd still prefer that Luck was the quarterback, but I think in a PPR format, or you saw Doyle kind of start off on the first drive there, have two big catches. So I guess if it's a league where people are owning more than one tight end, or it's a 16-team league or something like that, I'd probably still hold on to him just to see what this offense looks like with wherever they go, whether it's staying with Tolzien and I. Hopefully they give Brissett a shot, but either way, I can see him still having some use here. But Moncrief, yeah, I think he's a guy that needs a good quarterback.
Yeah, I think trying to be patient as much as you can. Like obviously, if you're loaded at running back and or loaded at receiver, and you have a guy that you're ready to move on from, that's fine. But try and remain patient. Like Paul Perkins, Rob Kelly, LeGarrette Blount. You're holding on to all three of them, right? Even after very underwhelming week ones.
Yeah, I mean, it was bad, but it's 1 week, and you don't want to be that guy that ends up dropping an RB2 after one bad week, and then you're chasing that position the whole week on the wire. So just don't do anything rash right now,
Yeah,
especially since I don't think, aside from Cohen, really there's that many guys that have emerged yet that makes sense for you to make the switch. So I'd stay put.
yep. And I remember when Devonta Freeman made his breakout, and they had Tevin Coleman there. Freeman was banged up a little bit for the first couple weeks. Everyone moved on. Everyone dropped him right away. And by week 3, week 4, oh, here comes the huge games. Oh, and now we have a top 10 running back that everyone got off the wire, and it wasn't the person that drafted him, and just very, very annoying. So be patient. Don't rush. Don't make stupid decisions. If you have people in your league that are ready to give up on DeMarco Murray, that are ready to give up on, studs that they drafted high just because they had one bad game, like pounce. Like get your deals done. But don't rush out, don't cut, don't sell off players just because you've had one bad week. We got to thank Thor 300 again, talking about my boy Dalvin Cook, 100 yards rushing. I know it's the Saints, but I love seeing this Vikings offense like come to fruition for a 1 week, anyways.
Yeah, yeah, no, I'm with you there. I think Thielen and Diggs and Rudolph, there's good pieces in this offense. So seeing Bradford being able to kind of put it together, but I do think we have to kind of keep in the back of our heads that this is the Saints, and being at the home opener and everything. I know Randy Moss getting kind of enshrined into their Ring of Honor there. They're a little jacked up, and I think there's going to be a little bit of a come down. Moving forward with this offense. Not that they can't be productive, but I feel like if this just reminds me of kind of the 49ers, for instance, last year in week 1, where, Carlos Hyde looked terrific and like, oh, maybe this offense really isn't that bad. And then, the next 3 weeks were a disaster. So just trying to manage expectations here.
Yeah. It's I think first 3-4 weeks is really critical. See how the teams go. If a team shows a trend for 3-4 weeks, then you can make actionable, moves. And obviously, if there's someone on the waiver wire you want to get, Kenny Golladay, Corey Davis, like I don't hate the idea of it. Just try and avoid cutting your studs until you really need to. And if it's 3 weeks in the season and Rob Kelly hasn't looked good, or Isaiah Crowell's having struggles, or they're just throwing a lot more, okay. Like if you want to make a move at that point, I don't fault you for it, but try and be patient. At FPAOP on Twitter, hit us up if you have thoughts on should I cut this guy for that guy. We're always here to help. We'll be back on Wednesday with the Mad Dog to kind of preview the week. If you missed our last week's show, basically we go by position and kind of give you a guy that to make sure you get in your lineup and a guy to kind of avoid. And obviously, I'm amazing because I told you to play Kobe Fleener, who got a touchdown. Basically a Hall of Famer, right, Damian?
No, just stop.
It was good. It was good. But yeah, for Damian Dabrowski, I'm Kyle Robert, and we'll talk to you guys next time.